This is an in-depth tutorial on how I made an inexpensive Beauxbaton hat.
I'm starting out with this little cheap straw hat that I found at the dollar store. You can find a lot of them this time of year, which is Easter time of year, for kids. This is obviously a toddler-sized one, but I assume you could probably do the same project for an adult as long as you didn't invest a whole lot in the straw hat if you're trying to keep costs low. I think Walmart has, in the summertime, cheap straw hats. So the color doesn't matter because it's going to be covered. So just something inexpensive. With basically what you want is for this part to fit your head properly. So that's where we're going to start.
So I've got my dollar store hat and just gonna cut off the tacky little, flower thing that we're not gonna need. And then next thing you're gonna do, just depends on the hat that you buy, but because my brim is a little wider than what I want my finished project to have, I'm just gonna take my seam ripper and pull out the stitches here and just reduce the width of my brim a little bit. And once you get it back around to where you need it to go, you can just secure it with a clip and then tuck the edge under, and you can either glue it or stitch it. You might want to do a little bit of both just to make sure that it holds. But basically you want to reduce it to the width that you need it to be. Okay, as I said earlier, we just removed the outer parts of the brim that I didn't need the width. We basically reduced the width. So you're tucking under the edge, and like I said, you can secure this with glue or stitching. Some people are frightened to put anything other than fabric under their sewing machine, and obviously you might want to just try, but this is just simple, like plasticky straw type stuff, so it's not going to hurt your machine at all. And you want to go back just a little bit, and then you can secure the layers with the zigzag stitch. Again, none of this is going to show, so it doesn't matter if you use couple thread or whatever you've got threaded in your machine at the moment. But basically you just want to secure that end tab from coming loose, and you can do that with stitching like this. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is make a pattern to cover your brim. I'm just working with felt, and don't pay any attention to the color because we're just actually making a pattern, and this is what I had on hand. So what you would do is lay your hat down and just make sure that you've got enough fabric all the way around to allow for seam allowance, which is normally 5/8 of an inch. And then you're just going to take your pen or marking implement of choice and basically mark the outline of the hat. And then what you're going to do, if you need to pin it in place to make sure you got it right, you can do that. But basically you want to then go inside and basically mark where this point is where the crown starts. So you're going to make the circle on the inside. So that's what we're doing right now. Okay, so then after you do your markings, you're going to be left with something that looks pretty much like this. And don't worry about the stains on your fabric. Again, you're just making a pattern. You could do this out of paper or whatever, but I'm just using a scrap piece of felt that I've got. So whatever you want to use to make your pattern. So what you've done is you've marked the inside circle and basically the outline of the hat. So what you're going to want to do is cut this out, and you want to cut 5/8 of an inch outside of your line to allow for seam allowance all around the brim. And then you want to cut 5/8 of an inch on the inside here. So basically you're going to be cutting a circle that way. Okay, so we cut our 5/8 of an inch roughly seam allowance from our circle. And it doesn't have to be an exact science unless you're one of those scientific people. I'm not. I'm one of those jump on and do it type people. But as you see, you basically have the seam allowance around the piece. And then the same thing with the circle in the center. Basically, you're going in 5/8 of an inch from here. And what you're basically doing is creating a pattern to cover this brim. So you just need enough to create your seam inside and out, and we'll go over that later, but that's what we've done there. Basically created a giant blue donut. Okay, so the next part is a little bit complicated, so I'll just try to explain what I'm doing here. You want to take a piece of fabric. Basically this isn't your nice fabric, this is your pattern making fabric, and I use felt because it's got a little more body to it and it's good for a hat. So what you want to do is start with a rough piece, and you might want to have extra in case you mess up. You can keep trying. This is kind of a trial and error type thing. But you want to go around the hat, and you're just going to sit with a bunch of pins and basically pin and tuck until you get the shape that you want. And basically wherever you pin, you can trim, leaving seam allowance, because this will inevitably be your pattern. With the Beauxbaton hat, it's going to be a little tricky. I think it looks like a Hershey Kiss. So you've just got to kind of work it. Now, granted, it may not be screen accurate when you're done because you might have seams or tucks, but we're making a cheap kind of cosplay. I'm making a 3-year-old version, so it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to kind of get the right feel. But after much pinning and shaping and playing around, I kind of ended up with this, which kind of looks like a Smurf hat. And I'm still not done. I'm still shaping it. But as you can see, I've trimmed and I've pinned around. And on the back, this would be the back side here, I've got this little pleat here. I might be able to work it out. Also, another thing I've done, now since this is where her head's going to be, so this is going to be above that, so this won't worry about touching her hair or anything. I just took some polyester stuffing. You can get it at any craft store. And you always want to pull it and stretch it because it'll fill more space that way, not really ball up. But basically, I've just stuffed the point of the hat with that to help give it that right shape. So again, you can continue to pin and shape as you go, but this is kind of roughly the idea that we're getting.
As I mentioned, you're basically creating the shape, what I'm keep calling it a Hershey Kiss, which is basically that little tilt there at the top, sort of like a Smurf hat. And we went over about how I stuffed the top with polyester filling, and you just continue to pin and trim, leaving seam allowance along the edges until you get a shape that you feel is correct. There's really no right or wrong to this. If I come up with a pattern for it, I'll let you know. But right now, I mean, you kind of see it's going to according to the size that you're going to make. But this is the rough shape. Now, on the wrong side here, I do have a little pleat. I don't know if you can see that. It's more like a dart. But where I pin that in just to take in the excess, then what you need to do is pinch it and pin it into place. I don't know if you can see that. But then once I did this dart, I cut the edge. And you'll see when I take this off and we're using this as a pattern why cutting that is important. So we'll need to remember how to do that dart when we're constructing it out of our actual hat fabric. And again, this isn't attached to the hat yet. This is just our pattern. And so I just kind of have it stretched over the hat, but you'll see in our next step. Okay, so once you've made the pattern and you've trimmed off, so you have the seam allowance all the way around, then what you need to do is obviously just take the pins out. Stop it and restart it. Okay, so once you've taken all the pins out and the stuffing that we had up in the top, you're going to be left with your pattern. And it's going to be look something like this. Again, this is where we did the dart, and this is why we trimmed it. So when we go in and we cut out the pattern, when we're sewing it out of our correct fabric, we're going to create that dart just by stitching there. So this is what your pattern piece looks like. This is for the top, and again, this is for around the brim. And we're going to count. We're going to cut 2 of these for the brim, for the top and the bottom, and then just 1 of each of these. Okay, so I purchased the felt to make the hat out of, and if you were doing real hat making, you would actually use wool. Wool felt's kind of tricky to find, especially at craft stores. Joann's carries some wool felt, but they're very limited on colors, and it is actually a little bit more a yard than regular craft felt. Craft felt's a lot easier to find. It's the same stuff you buy in squares, but you can get it in yardage. The important thing to note, though, is that craft felt, the cheaper stuff like this, is not dyeable. It's acrylic, so you cannot dye this. You're stuck with the color you have. If you were able to find wool felt in like a white or a cream, you could possibly dye it to the color that you needed. Again, I'm working on a time crunch, and this is just, you know, a fun little toddler costume, so I'm not too worried that the color isn't perfect, but this is like a light baby blue, so it'll work okay for the Beauxbatons. But if you were looking to make something a little more accurate, you might want to seek out a wool felt that is the right color. This, I ended up needing about a half a yard. I actually bought a little more than that just to make sure.
I had enough. But at Hobby Lobby, this cost me a whopping $1.43. So far, we don't have a whole lot invested. We have the hat from the dollar store. We have the felt for $1.43, if you're not counting my pattern making supplies. So pretty cheap. I should mention that you can make this hat out of a fabric other than felt. What I would recommend if you're using a different fabric is to interface it so that the fabric has some more body to it. It's going to add a little bit more cost to the project, and fabric may not be quite as forgiving as felt can be. Felt's great because you don't have to hem it, it doesn't fray, and it's going to give more of a look of a hat because most hats, especially the Beauxbaton hats, are made out of wool, and so this is going to simulate that look a little bit better than a fabric could. If I had a little more time on my side and patience with a toddler to go around to thrift stores, I might be able to find something like an old coat or something to hack up that's going to have the same type of finish and fabric. I just don't have anything in right now like that, so I'm going to go with just craft felt, something simple, and also to make this tutorial a little easier for just about anybody could find these things at their local store. So you've used your pattern piece to cut out the 2 brim pieces out of your good fabric, your blue felt that you're planning to make the hat out of. So again, you need 2 of the brim, one for the top and one for the bottom. So we've gone ahead and cut that. And then for the crown part, you have cutting just one thickness, not doubled, of each pattern piece. And the main thing you just want to make sure is that you have the right sides together, wrong sides together. So because there is a right side and a wrong side of the felt, one side's fuzzier, and so whatever side you choose to have on the outer portion, you just want to make sure that it's going to be the same side that's showing on both sides of the crown. So then once you've got that all pinned in place, this is again the dart, so you're going to trim down into there as you're cutting out this piece so that we can fold that and create the dart. And we'll go ahead and cut these out. So after you've cut them out, this is what you're left with. Again, you've got one of this piece, one of this piece, and 2 of these pieces. And out of the fabric that I bought, the felt, you see, you have quite a bit left. So if you do mess up, you could probably get a whole other hat out of this amount of felt that I purchased, which I think was a ½ a yard. So there you've got that. So the first thing you're going to do once you have this pattern piece cut out is you're going to pin this section together, and you basically just want to figure out what side that you want to show on the outside. So once you've discovered that or figured that out, you just bring these 2 pieces together, and then you're going to pin along this line here, creating a dart, and then you would sew just so that when this opens, you've got this piece with a little pleat, and I'll pin it together and show you what that looks like. Okay, so Lena's going to help me sew this next portion, and what we've done is pinned that little dart, if you can see this, and it tapers off to where it's not cut down. And so you would start your stitching here, tie off, and then stitch just along the line that you've pinned, taking up maybe about ½ an inch seam there. And so when you're done, it's going to make this little dart, which is going to be the back of our top portion of our hat.
Hey, Mom, you want to try my sewing machine?
Okay. Okay, baby. So that's what it looks like after you've sewn the dart in there. Alright, so after you have sewn the dart into the back part, like this, then you're just going to pin the back to the front. And it's not, you don't have to worry about being too exact with it, because you can just trim it off, but they should line up. I would start at the curve
and match them together, and then bring the pins all the way around the side and just pin the front to the back like that. And of course it's not going to lay flat because this is meant to open up and go around the crown of the hat. So this is kind of what you're doing for the next step, front to the back.